Howdy friends, welcome back to the lab. Recently, Games Workshop has announced the first plastic Eldar Exodites, an Eldar subfaction known for riding dinosaurs on backwater planets. The Exodites left the Eldar Empire just before the Empire partied so hard they birthed a Chaos God, making them pockets of ancient Eldar culture. The Exodites have been a favorite for obscure lore specialists everywhere, myself included. And especially me, because when the Exodites were announced, I got like 9 million fucking pings from random people. Like, Jesus Christ, it's 2 p.m. guys, I'm trying to sleep. More importantly, I figured now would be the perfect time to get on board with the Exodite action. Usually I'm pretty content with having these new releases come and go. I work at my own pace, generally. But this time, I wanted to get to the party early. But how exactly would I be doing that? They haven't actually released the kits yet. Well, I've been making very small progress on a proper Eldar Exodite army of my own here on the channel for the last couple of years, but with a little bit of a twist. As many of a longtime watcher of my channel knows, I am obsessed with everything related to Capcom's premier video game series, Monster Hunter. Been playing it since the first one in 2004. I never shut the fuck up about it. A few years ago, I sculpted some Monster Hunter themed shining spears to use in this army, and then filed them away. But progress on this has been glacial since every model in the army had to be custom sculpted, some more than others. I resolved to at least start making progress on the models that I do currently have. And what better time now than with the official Exodite models hitting the shelves. Now, as I said before, the models that I'm going to be using today were sculpted a few years ago, so they're a little messy, but most importantly, I don't actually have any footage of me making them. I would like to say that I lost the footage, but seeing as this was a project I was doing on the side anyways, the footage never existed in the first place. Since we don't have much to look at for building in particular, I'm going to use that space to kind of give you an introduction as to what you're looking at, since I can't guarantee that anybody has seen all of the Exodite build diary videos I've done so far. Try to keep the enthusiasm in check. I'll try to just, this is the basic thing you're looking at. I'll try not to give you like a 20-minute sermon on, the history of, this guy's left toenail or whatever. Don't get me wrong, I could probably do that for a lot of the stuff here, but I'll try to be brief. However, if this video does pique your curiosity, just know that there is a playlist covering the rest of this army so far, so please go check that out if it sounds interesting to you, or if you like, elves on dinosaurs. But yeah, that's enough rambling. Let's go ahead and just crack into it. So this is the first shining spear I had sculpted for this unit. All of these use the Warhammer Fantasy Battle Cold One riders as the base for these sculpts. While the army is Craftworld Eldar, I found that Dark Eldar or Dark Elf models work better for this army because the segmented plate design is very common on Monster Hunter armors. Additionally, my army is specifically from the desert, so only desert-dwelling monsters were selected for this army. All three models have had their Cold Ones converted to look very similar to a third-generation monster named Great Jaggy. Jaggy are these little annoying raptor bastard things, and in 3rd generation, Great Jaggy serves as their pack leader. Great Jaggy is known for being a beginner-level monster, sporting a unique coloration, and its signature call that has transcended time and space to become a meme in and of itself. Personally, I'm very fond of Great Jaggy, and the creature is more than capable of taking out unprepared hunters, so it makes sense that some of my Exodites would tame them to use as their mounts. The fur was sculpted on, while the signature frills were reproduced across each model with blue stuff molds, and while there might have been more I could have done to the body, mainly in the face and probably in the stomach area, give it a little fat, I think it works out as a mostly slimmer version of the monster. Great Jaggy, but a little scarier. Now the rider here is sporting the armor of a monster called Basarios, a monster with a rocky hide that inhabits volcanic areas, although in Generation 5 they've been spotted in the arid desert areas. This monster, known as the juvenile form of a monster named Gravios, which is its own laser-wielding hulking juggernaut of a problem to be honest, burrows underground to disguise itself as rocks to hide from larger predators. Basarios tend to spend most of their time burrowed underground, although they will unearth to grab a snack consisting of rare ores and minerals, or to defend itself. Basarios' armor sports very distinct pauldrons that have always made this armor set stand out as one of my favorite designs. Although, to be honest, I like the gunner design a bit more, but maybe I'm just biased on this one. RIP gunner armor designs. While not originally planned to be in this army, Basarios appearing in the Sandy Plains in Monster Hunter Rise gave me an excuse to add another of my favorite monsters to my army. And finally, his weapon, the Night Lance from 2nd generation. As far as I remember, this design hasn't popped up in a later generation, but I mean, I could be wrong. Given that Monster Hunter originally debuted in 2004, this is basically 20 years of retroactive, vague remembrances. And like, yeah, I'd try to do my fact checking, but it's been 20 years and I still get Rathalos' elemental weakness mixed up, so like, don't put too much stock in what I say. Regardless, this is a fairly competent weapon for new hunters, usually made from the materials of another pack hunter called the Velociprey and its pack leader, the Velocidrome. As I said, not exactly a desert monster, but the design is generic enough to make it applicable. It's a reach, but like, who's gonna be upset about this fucking lance, you know? The Rider sculpt uses the aforementioned Cold One Rider with a modified Gen 1 Stormcast Eternal Shield sanded down and sculpted on top of. Curiously, I left the weapons as sub-assemblies on the other Riders, but this guy was all glued together preemptively, and I don't exactly have an answer as to why that is either. Maybe I just got excited and jumped the gun? Jumped the bowgun? Jumped the heavy bowgun? The general strategy with these sculpts was to start inside and work out. What that means is I started with the hardest to reach areas like the underplates or the body and torso area. Then I worked out, working on overlapping plates that are easier to reach. From there, belts, pouches, and larger armor plates were gradually built up until the design was complete. While the Rider was scratch built, I attempted to 3D print a model rip of the Night Lance, but I wasn't really happy with the results once it was printed out, and a lot of the spikes and the tip of the lance were all really thin resin, and something snapped, and I just said, alright, screw it. This saw to me recycling the center body of the lance, and sculpting new bone spikes, a scale design, and a new tip. And yeah, that is just a toothpick soaked in superglue and sanded down. Could have maybe sanded it down at a harsher angle, just to make it a little more slender, but hey, it worked. It stabbed me more than enough times. For the next Rider, the Great Jaggy mount was assembled in the same way, but this hunter sports different gear much more synonymous to the desert. Gen 3 Chads and all you Gen 5 Zygotes may be familiar with a little monster called Baroth, a bipedal monster that sports a unique crown on the front of its head. Baroth are actually poorly adapted to the desert heat, so they tend to live around watering holes on the outskirts of these arid areas. The crown actually doubles as a set of, snorkels for the monster, allowing it to submerge itself in the mud and water to stay cool while being able to breathe or ambush unsuspecting prey stopping in to look for a drink. In combat, the monster covers itself in mud that it can sling off of itself, which can bind hunters unless they somehow find a way to knock the mud off of themselves. It then uses its strong hind legs and massive crown for devastating charge attacks that have caused many a new hunter to rage quit and head straight to GameFAQs to complain. Or I guess Reddit if you're Gen 5. Does anybody actually use GameFAQs these days? Like posting on the board? For his weapon, he sports the Renaplos Lance, a rugged lance belonging to a monster of the same name. While not an entirely standout weapon mechanically, Renaplos debuted in the same game as Baroth and also attacks with his own charge attacks that can really disrupt a hunt. I cannot tell you how many times one of these fuckers has charged me as soon as I went to unload a full clip into a downed monster, but watching people whine about it got me nostalgic after a certain point. In their pain, I saw my own flashbacks from the Gen 1 Bullfango. It's crazy how a little bit of time can make something frustrating become nostalgic. But anyways, if you played 3rd gen Monster Hunter, especially Try, you probably saw like 20 guys who looked just like this rider in full Barroth armor. The jump between new monsters back then was much more difficult and apparent than these newer gens, 3rd gen being no exception to that. The HR9 Barroth Urgent was a genuine pain in the ass for a lot of new hunters, so I spent a lot of time helping people through it back in the day, or helping people farm armor, since its armor is solid defense. It'll lash at a Rathian pretty easily with a few armor spheres. Plus, low rank armor was more useful in Try since you could like upgrade it to high rank and it had different skills, so you can kind of mix and match 2 armor, but that's another conversation. Let me actually stay on topic here. This rider was one where everything was sculpted from scratch. The shield was built on top of a simple plastic hard frame, and the shafts of the lance was sculpted out of a wooden skewer. Each tube-like part of the monster was rolled out, applied, and had a divot pressed into the armor, using footage from Monster Hunter World as a reference due to the game's generally higher fidelity than Try. I don't think a lot of people would argue there. While the front of the shield originally used some big ugly beads in its design when I sculpted it, I decided to replace them with some small plastic hard rivets that look a bit more in scale, the only time so far that I've actually altered one of my older sculpts. These were round, and I think they make dowels that are hexagonal. I gotta look into that. Finally, the handle wrap was made out of sewing thread. Barroth is one of my personal favorite low to middle class monsters in the entire series due to our history together, and it would honestly be pretty out of line for me to not add this armor set to my army. While the sculpt is a bit softer in areas that I think I would have been more diligent about now, I'm still quite happy with the design I sculpted, years ago now. That's a weird thought. And the final rider, the Exarch. This was a really fun sculpt, and I'm really glad I finally get to paint it. This hunter is wearing the armor of a monster called a Cephalos, and is wielding a bit of a different weapon. Let me start with the armor. The Cephalos and its pack leader, the Cephadrome, are veterans of 1st generation Monster Hunter. The Cepha family are sometimes colloquially... Holy shit. Colloquially... It's like 5 o'clock in the morning. People call them sand sharks, as they've evolved to be able to swim through the sand effortlessly. Many an old school hunter will be familiar with the pain of chasing these bastards around the desert, but loud noises from sonic bombs or exploding barrels are also reliable ways to force them out of the sand and into combat. The Cephalos are a deceptively colorful species, as their brown coloration is only due to sand and earth that clogs their scales. In reality, their scales range from a brilliant blue or sometimes a deep shade of purple when properly washed and treated. The armor also confers small bonuses to resisting the desert heat and massive bonuses to fashion, leading to a very vibrant armor set, and my current armor set of choice in my Monster Hunter Dose playthrough. Could I be using better armor? Probably. I do have access to like Rathian. But I'm the only guy on the Monster Hunter Dose server wearing this shit that I've seen, so people recognize me in a crowd, which is way better than being the 900th Rathian or Daimyo armor hunter. As for the weapon, this is not a lance, but a Generation 2 weapon called a gun lance. It's basically a lance filled to the brim with exploding ammo. The gun lance has been the lance's more bombastic cousin for many years, although to be honest, the upgrades Generation 5 Lance got in World just makes this a complete no-brainer to me. Like cool, your Lance shoots some firecrackers, but Gen 5 Lance's ability to play extremely aggressively with guard steps, power stance, and counters is infinitely more fun than the little firecracker Lance, but I'll stop while I'm ahead. I know if I don't keep these rants about Monster Hunter short, my editor/girlfriend is going to be very mad at me, so let me stop while I'm ahead. More importantly is the design I chose, the Rathian gun lance. The Rathian is the female counterpart to the male Rathalos, Monster Hunter's most prominent power couple, known as the Queen of the Earth and King of the Heavens, or King of the Skies, translations, whatever. While Rathalos prefer to fight from the air, much to the chagrin of everyone with a pulse, seriously, you Gen 3 up kids have no room to complain. You have never been hit by Rathalos suddenly deciding to add 3 minutes onto your hunt time. Like, just at will, he just fucking did that. The Rathian generally fights closer to the ground, using an arsenal of fireballs and a poisonous tail to eliminate her foes. While Rathian used to be higher on the food chain in Gen 1, Rathian was quickly demoted down the roster for being a bit easier to fight than Rathalos, and I would honestly be lying if I said that wasn't kinda true, especially like Hammer and Hunting Horn, they just demolish her. But a lot of people don't appreciate that she used to be a bona fide end-of-rank monster. Did you know that Rathian was the first monster ever designed for this entire series? That's a pretty impressive achievement to have to your name. Also, you simply cannot ignore her variants. Pink Rathian will shock you with how much damage she can put out for her rank in any game, and Gold Rathian was given a serious makeover in Iceborne. Seriously, I cannot tell you how many wipes I've seen on that one Pink Rathian Urgent in 4 Ultimate. I'm so fucking off topic, but I triggered myself. I have PTSD. Okay, let's actually talk about the model here. Out of every model I sculpted in this batch of Shining Spears, this was no doubt the one I had the most fun with. My scales came out looking more like a cloth gambeson. I think I probably could have tried to curve the bottom of each of them, or maybe made a stamping tool. But I think I hit every notable feature on the armor to some competent degree. The fins were a bit tricky as I had to keep them thin, but not so thin as to be fragile. The spines that run over the fins were something I experimented with, but never quite got looking right. So in the end, I decided to pass the buck to current day John to try and fake that with some paint. I don't even know if that's possible, but we're gonna find out together. As for the gun lance, I initially tried to do the same thing as the Knight Lance and 3D print a model rip for the Rathian gun lance. However, the details on both parts were extremely shallow and not very detailed. So I decided to do what any sane person would and resculpt every shell and scale found on the gun lance. The printed shield also ended up kind of flat as well, so I bulked that out with sculpting and recycled the gun lance body, which prevented me from having to sculpt that kind of weird handguard there. The scales and shells were sculpted separately and attached later on, and a new tip was constructed as well, leading to a huge improvement over what I had printed out. It was also a really good way of learning how to make these scaled designs that I eventually ended up using on some other sculpts. Okay, I think I rambled on long enough. I'd love to have had some actual footage of me sculpting these on screen, but given that these were sculpted maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, I hope my overview of the source material and the general strategy were interesting enough. I can at least be more detailed in the painting step since I actually have some footage. So let's do a Zenithal Prime on these guys and actually get some work done. Seriously, man, it's just a backflip. You dodged like 400 of them getting up into high rank. Just don't get hit. It's that fucking easy. First up on the painting block are going to be the Great Jaggies. We'll start by painting their underbellies and working our way up, starting with skeleton bone. These days I'm more of a sponge painter, but proper solid base coating is what this army's been using so far, so, you know, we'll stay consistent. Most of the models I've converted so far, and I will show you guys some later, their detail has been too small to really get a worthwhile sponge painting out of it, so that's why I'm just doing normal base coating. I went to highlight the tan with dry brushing, but every color I tried really didn't give me the contrast I wanted. I ended up settling for mixing pure white with pale yellow, a compromise between a warm highlight and something bright enough to just, you know, you can actually fucking see it. Next was Jaggy's purple scales, and for this I used a blue-violet for the base coat, focusing on the top half of the hide. I mixed it with pale yellow for a highlight, using a makeup sponge to ensure that I didn't get too much paint down into the base coat layer of the scales. Next was the stripe or orange across the hide. Honestly, in retrospect, it's not quite a standard orange, more of a reddy orange, maybe like a dark salmon, I don't know. But I was hoping the wash would do something to kind of correct it, which it didn't. Nevertheless, for this process here, my orange paints have historically been pretty thin, regardless of brand, so I first painted a mix of brown and orange as the base coat, hugging my references tightly as I traced the stripe patterns across the body, using a series of uneven strokes for a bit of variation. From there, the pure orange layered on way more easily. With the body mostly handled, I took a quick second to paint the inside of the mouths with a mix of pink and bone. The bone to help with coverage and to slightly desaturate this very flamboyant pink. With that done, I moved on to painting the claws with black and gray. Or at least attempted to, because apparently the task of holding this stuff in frame and peeling off this sticker, which I should have done beforehand, apparently just kicked my ass. With a black base coat and a gray highlight on the upper side of the claws, I thinned down a black speed paint to blend the two colors together. I don't remember why I did it this way instead of just mixing the two for a dark gray, so I wouldn't have to basically do a 3-part process instead of a 2-part, but honestly I have no fucking clue, dude. I just work here. Next up, the straps and saddle get a brown base coat, in this case, Ancient Forest. The Ancient Forest, not to be confused with the Great Forest from 2nd generation, is the first map featured in Monster Hunter World, being grasslands and a large forest wrapped around a massive ancient tree known for... Alright, my bad. The straps and the saddle got a brown base coat, nothing special, and to highlight them, we turn back to our bone. I honestly use this bone color a lot in general, now that I think about it. Not my favorite paint, but it looks good. Dries kind of fast. Next up is the hot sauce. No, not really, it's not hot sauce. This is my bottle of marine juice. Marine juice is a great universal wash that I've been using for models for years. It's a quick and easy way to get consistent, dark, earthy wash tones that don't shift base coat colors too much, even more so if you thin it, which is what I'm going to be doing here. This is mainly applied just to get those recesses filled and defined, and outside of reapplying a white dry brush to the fur and painting the eyes, the gray jaggies were mostly done. So we'll shift our attention over to our first rider, the Baroth Hunter. For the Baroth armor, I started by layering on silver, since the deepest parts of the armor were metal. From there, my first base coat was a mix of Ancient Forest and orange. From there, I used pure Ancient Forest on the upper halves of the armor, then an even darker brown halfway up that. I think I forgot to put it in frame, but I didn't put my paints away yet. Let me see. Cuirass Leather from Two Thin Coats. You don't need to put an image or anything on screen. People can Google that. One thing I was careful of not to forget were the stirrups and the straps, painting them to match the saddles. The model got a coat of marine juice after this. I didn't actually end up doing a lot of edge highlighting on it. I felt like the design on the crown trunk part of it was, it was like a freehand, so I didn't want to edge highlight on top of it. But in retrospect, I probably could have done with some more detailing around the waist. It ain't the end of the world, at least. Honestly, base coats and a wash, totally fine for an army. I just put my models right in front of a expensive camera and on the internet, and people judge me for it, so I like my stuff looking just a little tiny bit better, Just a tad. Base coating and washing was pretty much the same deal I gave to the Renaplos lance, with the only standout of this process being that I sponged the bone onto the lance shaft for a little bit of a gradient. This helped put a slight texture onto the sharpened bone as well, a bit more interesting than just a flat brush-made base coat would have made it. I also sponged on the highlight for the shield before painting in the bony framework around the shell. Don't think it really did much, but, hey, it's there. Renaplos aren't normally purple in-game, so I wonder why their gear is a much more vibrant purple. Maybe it's like how a crab turns red when you cook it? I don't know, deepest lore. Anyway, nothing special on the weapons, and since we covered how to paint the Great Jaggies, we'll go on ahead and move on to the second rider. The Basarios armor starts off by hitting the underlying silver armor, just in the same way as the Baroth armor was. The only real complicated part of this will be replicating the stony texture on the armor. We'll start with a dark gray base coat to cover up all the silver overspill, or if you went brain empty mode like I did, and just assaulted the entire fucking model with silver, you can get those areas properly blocked out. For the texturing, we're going to be sponging on a neutral gray with a piece of pluck foam. This pluck foam is commonly found in customizable carry cases, and it has a coarser texture, which I think will help sell the rocky texture to our boy here. We just need to make sure not to cover the dark gray completely. After this, we'll apply another layer of bright gray, covering even less area to ensure that you can see all three colors to the pattern. Admittedly, I went a little heavy on it, but whatever. We'll finish off the main areas with a rough edge highlight of pure white. Since the base coats of this model are on the darker side, they don't really tend to pop out as much compared to other models, so a bit of edge highlighting will reinforce the gray coloration while helping to pluck the edges of the sculpt out of the dark spots. One thing I wanted to do is paint the blue flecks you can see over the armor's texture. I assume this to be spots of Macalite ore that the Basarios had eaten before turning into Low Rank's latest fashion sense. I mixed a blue and a white together, laying spots of this color on top of randomly placed dark gray spots to give them a bit of definition at a glance. I think it looks pretty good, though I would be remiss in mentioning how much I hate farming for Macalite ore. Seriously, do you know how expensive this hammer was? If it wasn't basically the best hammer I could find before HR10, I wouldn't have bothered. And really, I'm only doing hammer so I can get to high rank and start gunning properly, because gunning is fucking expensive in DOS. Next, we'll paint what I assume are the Velociprey scales, starting by mixing a blue into my dark gray for a very desaturated, like kind of gray navy color thing. I moved into a stripe of a neutral blue before sponging on some spots of a light blue on top of it. Admittedly, the texture I'm referencing is, for lack of a better word, complete dog butter, but I think it gets the job done. There's a vibe it's transferring, and I'm picking up on it, you know? Next, I applied a bone to, well, the bone, but all of the decorative straps that are normally the straps that you can recolor once you get to high rank. In retrospect, I forgot to paint the black diamonds across these straps, but whatever. I gave them a few white highlights on the top ends at least. I also took a second to paint the helmet feather using red, white, black, bone to some degree. You know, dark, neutral, bright, easy stuff. It did look a little bit desaturated though, so I ended up glazing some red speed paint over it, in particular Flesh Terror's red, to help give it some color back. Easy stuff, nothing super complex here, anybody can do it. After a quick splash of skin speed paint to the face, the model got a dose of marine juice all over. I did take some non-diluted marine juice and reinforce the shading on places like the edge banding of the shield, but I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really do jack shit. Seeing as there were no sub-assemblies for this model, I glued the whole model onto the back of his brave Jaggy, and another rider was done, leaving one final model of the batch. The Cephalos armor is probably my favorite out of the bunch just because of how vibrant we're going to make it. We'll start with the scales, using blue-green as our base and pushing it up and down with black and white. My initial attempts looked pretty okay, highlighting each scale with like a dark spot at the bottom and a light spot on the top. I'll try to remember to make like a little diagram for the editor to put in. Thank you, babe. And while the freehanding looks solid enough, I felt the mail was a bit dark. I was a bit nervous to paint over the work I literally just finished, but sometimes you just gotta do it. I ended up repainting the armor in generally brighter colors with a very thin blue wash for part separation, and honestly, I'm so glad I did. It looks much better than my first attempt. It's not exactly one-to-one with my reference, but way better than the first one. While waiting for the armor to dry, I splashed a thin layer of white onto the fins and the tabard. While white on the fins was just to help with coverage later and a little bit of boredom, this white on the tabard needed some red trim on the sides, so I grabbed a flat red and did a little edge highlighting there. My sculpting may not be supremely amazing. Hell, even 4 years later, I don't think I'm all that, I'm not a master at this shit. But I'm thankful I at least left myself some edges to highlight, I knocked out some minor colors like Ancient Forest on the gloves and an ochre for smaller belts and straps across the model. These colors were also used on the backpack as well, with silver on the belt buckle and backpack latches. Next up, the fins. Time to nut up and just get them done. I base coated each one with pale yellow before mixing pale yellow and orange together. This mix was used as a larger first band of transition color on the ends of the fins, with a pure orange making up the darkest band of color on the very ends. You could honestly do some fancy blends here, but I really fucking hate blending. It takes a long time, and it's boring, and I'm bad at it. So, no, it's really the time thing. As for the spines, I had no clue on what I was going to do here, but I did actually find up something I settled on. I grabbed my previously mentioned medium brown Ancient Forest and mixed it with pale yellow, giving me a darker color that I could use for the shadowy base of the spines. Having a dark color here is going to make them stand out much more when viewed from a distance. I laid this color down in a thick band, then came in with a very thin line of pure pale yellow, which honestly netted me some pretty decent looking and well-defined spines. I gotta admit, I didn't expect that to work as well as it does, but I'm really not one to look a gift horse in the mouth. Or in this case, a Cephalos. Actually, I hate Cephalos. Fuck those bastards. I'm looking straight in its mouth as soon as I can catch up to it. With the armor and fins done, the armor was looking pretty damn colorful, if I do say so myself. Some areas, like the metallics, still needed definition, so I hit the armor with slightly diluted marine juice, just enough to get some definition between those silver panels. I did do some touch-ups off camera, but honestly not many, mainly just fixing some overspill that I had missed. But at this point, the armor was mostly done, so I moved on to the gun lance. The gun lance was not much more complicated than the other models of this batch, though I was striving for a good color match to the Rathian scales. New games desaturated Rathian's color palette, but I wanted something a little bit more vibrant while keeping the vibes. I ended up just settling on a neutral green base coat, sponging on a warmer green, in this case ethereal green, on top of it to bring out the sculpted texture. For the final highlight, I mixed that ethereal green with a bit of pale yellow for a warm pale green. The darker shell components were painted dark brown, highlighted up to a bone, and the spiny tuft on the shield was just done regular ass black. Glue the guy on, and ta-da! Projecto completo. And here we are, the final Shining Spear paint job for my Exodite army. Please forgive any kind of weird camera angles we had to use here, as they're a little bit larger than what we had to shoot for when they're all clustered up. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how my Dragon Knights came out. I could definitely 1000% spend a few hours nitpicking every single issue I had with the sculpts, such as the cold ones still looking a little bit, dark elfy. Oh, that sounds bad. The faces could have been modified a little bit more, and some of the straps were not really up to my current standards, as they were pre-rolled a little bit too thick and then just applied on. But overall, I'm still quite happy with the sculpting. I'm quite happy enough to, put them on YouTube. If I hated it, you guys wouldn't see it. I recognize that some parts that I am not happy with were compromises in making the project doable for what I was capable of at the time. A little bit of willingness to perform at that point in my hobby career, and a little bit of time saving, I think the painting came out pretty good as well, even with some of these minis simply being base coats and washes in some areas. The areas that did get some edge highlights look really damn good as well. I do think the Baroth Hunter in particular may have benefited from a few edge highlights, especially on the waist and leg area, but honestly, it looks fine as is. The color is different enough from the saddle to where it doesn't blend in. If it was the same shade of brown, then, definitely 100%, but like a normal brown and then kind of like an ochre orange color, I think it works. I think my main problem with that is a potential missed opportunity to sponge on some texture, or maybe even freehand some ridges. Although, given that the ridges go through 3 different colors on the model, I'm not exactly sure what color, I would obviously do it with like a bone or a pale yellow, but I wonder how that would change how the mini is read from a distance. Like right now, it definitely looks like the Baroth armor colors, but if it's covered in so much bone and pale yellow, I wonder if it wouldn't necessarily look like that anymore. If that makes sense? I don't know, I'm just kind of brainstorming here. Personally, my favorite of the bunch has to be the Cephalos Armored Hunter with the Rathian Gun Lance. I'm glad I was able to solve the fin problem that my past self, completely offloaded onto me, and I think I was successful in bringing out the small details on the Gun Lance. Seeing as how I spent the longest sculpting that weapon compared to the other 2 lances, I'm very glad that that work paid off. While I am very excited to see Games Workshop's official depiction of Exodites, and, they could use some improvements, some tweaks, I'm still very glad to say that I'm the only person in the entire world who has Shining Spears themed to Monster Hunter so specifically to my tastes. Although I guess technically, I saw that they have rules. The Exodite kill team is gonna be getting rules for Big Hammer, like proper under a Dragon Knight data sheet. I don't know if I'm gonna be calling these guys Shining Spears anymore. I guess I'll just see how they get statted out. I got options, I guess. So there you go. What did you think of my custom Shining Spears? As much as I enjoy my own custom sculpts, I know deep down that I will end up probably getting some of those official Exodites as well for some, other project down the line. Maybe if they sell well, Games Workshop will be more incentivized to expand them into their own Exodite models, kind of like the Harlequins, you got a little bundle of things they could use. Maybe the Exodites will get something too. It would be nice for Xenos to get things. Just saying. These guys are part of my long-running Monster Hunter Exodite project, which, as previously mentioned, I do have a playlist for, if anything here piqued your interest, but I don't think I've shown anything painted so far here on the channel. I think like 5 guys. So I'm just going to kind of use this space in my video to kind of show off some other things. I've had some footage of my 10-man Guardian squad playing here, each based on an existing Monster Hunter armor set from across the generations. Most of them are in line with the army, either generic metal or desert-based monsters. Progress on this army has been pretty much next to zero lately. As I've previously said, sculpting these usually takes a long time, and as much as I like the army, they don't really get clicks. Unfortunately, YouTube is a numbers game, and as much as I like having my own projects to pursue, sometimes you need the numbers to keep floating, man. I've sculpted an Autarch on his own mount, modeled after the desert tyrant himself, the Diablos, and I've also had an absolute nightmare of a time ripping the 3D files for a Celtis Queen that I was going to be using as my main tank for the army, and I went through the whole process of getting the files, getting them repaired, printing them multiple times actually, because I had to find a good size. Then, since the bug was all textured like video game texture, I had to physically resculpt each piece to give it texture, basically. It was a whole process. It was an absolute fucking nightmare, but I'm very proud of that model as well. Oh, and then I went through the process of making silicone molds for it so I could, duplicate it down the line. It was just probably one of the most resolved testing things I've done in my modeling hobby. So if you're interested in me almost losing my sanity and being a couple $100 in the hole, please go check that out. In addition, I also have a really cool sand boat to be used as the army's primary transport, basically a wave serpent, which was converted from a Dark Eldar boat. I really like how this thing looks. Unfortunately, I never assembled it all the way because I don't really have storage space for it. If all of this Monster Hunter stuff sounds interesting to you and you guys want to, push me to make more progress on it, please share the video around. If it gets, I'm more inclined to put the time and effort into something if I know people are going to be watching it. I'd like to say thank you all for watching, and an extra special shout out to all of my patrons who support the channel. It actually occurred to me the other day, I don't know if I really mentioned it, but my Patreon is free. Everybody gets the same level of access whether you are donating or not. So there's kind of logically no reason to not be in my Patreon, just saying. While I do kind of sometimes forget to update on the proper day, I do weekly updates every Sunday. Sometimes it's Monday because I get distracted. But basically, my Patreon is a place where I update weekly. I also occasionally give some sneak peeks at projects. There's a special channel in the Discord that you get access to if you're a patron. Also, if I ever finish a video early, I always give early access to my patrons if possible. You do not necessarily have to contribute monetarily, but when people on YouTube say that even just a couple of bucks goes a long way, it really does. $5 on Patreon is basically like 4,000 or 5,000 views worth of ad rev on YouTube, and that goes miles in supporting the channel. Currently, we don't have any new patrons since the last video, but this just gives me a chance to say thank you to all of my existing patrons. Free, paid, it doesn't matter. Having you guys there to bounce ideas off of and respond to surveys and leave comments is very useful to me. It gives me a bit of direction when I need it, and I really do appreciate having that support network there. As I just said, joining is totally free. There is literally no loss on your end. Any kind of monetary transaction is completely optional. There's also a Discord that you can come hang out in, where we shitpost and talk about hobby stuff on the reg. It's a very comfy crew of people, so if you're ever looking for a laid-back place to for some chatting and banter, honestly, we argue about Gundam a lot. There's a lot there's a lot of Gundam talk in there. Links to everything will be down below. I appreciate any kind of support you want to show for the channel, whether it's a like, share, subscribe. I don't remember everything you can do. I think that's it, right? I've just completely fucking blanked. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to my girlfriend for editing, and I'll see you guys next time. I'm still working on it.